Going.
It's being recorded for quality and control purposes.
Yeah, so we are now live. Welcome everyone to our sports marketing pathway presented by BodyArmor. My name is Christian Murray. I'm the programming intern with Sports Biz Camps. And you want to do a quick introduction, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Lau. I am the in-market leader for Sports Biz Camps in Detroit, Michigan, but I'm dialing in from San Jose, California, here on the West Coast of the United States. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us today. I think right now I'll turn it over to Christian and we'll go through some introductions and get things started. Thanks, Christian.
Perfect. So before we introduce our panelists, start off with some housekeeping rules for our chat and our audience. Just to let you guys know, your screen is not going to be used. But we do encourage you guys to submit your questions through our chat function, and then periodically, probably 7 to 10 minutes in between our questions, we'll grab a question from the chat so you guys will be represented. And then also I want to remind you guys that the Career Exploration Pass program, basically that's how you guys win prizes through Sports Biz Camps. That is just like this. So you get that through completing the assignments and watching our talk interviews and building points through that. So stay tuned for that and looking forward to our conversation. So jumping right into it, into our illustrious panel presented by BodyArmor, and we have some from CAA and Oakview Group. So jumping right into it, we'll start into just a quick career path and how you got to where you are, your current role today. We'll start with you, Don.
Yeah. So first, thanks for having us, everyone. My career path, I grew up in a small town, North Carolina, and I just knew I wanted to work in sports, play basketball, play soccer, etc. And what really kind of like sparked for me, I thought I was going to be a sports agent. And I'm a huge North Carolina Tar Heel fan, so I was like, oh, some of these guys going to the pro, like want to make sure they maximize their marketing deals and what can they do, and I just always had that passion. But it wasn't until I had an internship with NASCAR, I did a diversity internship program, and that is kind of what it brought me to the world of sports marketing. And after that, it's just kind of been a wild ride from there. Worked with Sprint, All-State doing college football when they had the BCS national championship games, parlayed into working with Anheuser-Busch on the global level, did the FIFA World Cup, worked on the Olympics, then ended up coming over the BodyArmor as recently. And since then I've worked on UFC, NASCAR, NCAA, Major League Soccer, doing stuff with athletes, and so the whole nine. So it's been a fulfilling career so far, and definitely excited for the next chapter.
Wow, really, really good, impressive resume you got there. So go into you, Malcolm.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you y'all all for having me. Really shout out to all the students that logged in. I really wish I had something like this. When I was a student, I would have been miles ahead. But my background, I'm from Chicago. Similarly, grew up loving sports, basketball primarily, being a Bulls fan. And from there, I knew I wasn't quite good enough to go pro myself, but I found out there was a whole business side to the industry and really fell in love with this idea of, similar to Don, thinking scout or agent or general manager, right? And that's all I really knew. But I went to UMass Amherst to study sport management, and their program, one of the top sport management college majors in the nation, and there I actually learned about the business, right? So like this panel, sports marketing, and some of the other panels that you'll be hearing this week, I got a better idea of what this industry actually is, and the fact that anything you see on TV, there's a whole business behind anything you see on social media. Anything you see, there's somebody that's clocking in, clocking out, and making a career out of that. And so I just fell in love with the idea of actually loving what I do for my day-to-day. A lot of people don't have that luxury. And from there, I interned at the sports agency, interned with the NBA team, the Sixers in their front office, worked at the NBA league office for 5 years, primarily working on the G League and the business there. We rebranded, did marketing, content, did all these things, and then just finished grad school at Harvard Business School. And now it's actually my second day on my new job. So you guys caught me at a good time, but I'm head of athlete content strategy at CAA. And we can dive into a little bit more of what that means. But CAA is essentially an agency that represents some of your favorite athletes: Zion Williamson, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Rodgers, all these big names, and they help manage and market them in addition to other businesses they have. So that's a bit about me.
Well, yeah, this is a way to start your second day of work. So what about you, Ruben?
So similar childhood aspirations as Melcom and Don. Grew up basketball, football. Knew my basketball career ended when I stopped growing, and then football, I kind of chose not to go that route too far. But I actually got my start through college sports. I went to Appalachian State, and that's where I worked with the athletic department and sports information department. I was really hands-on with the team. It wasn't necessary. I ended up getting an internship after that, doing the same thing at a different school. And I realized that wasn't the avenue that I wanted, but I liked the marketing aspect of it, and being able to kind of like push certain things around sports. And so found my way to Octagon, where I worked there for a while, primarily on Bank of America. So I primarily worked in Major League Baseball. So I did that for about 5 years or so, and working in all their major events and with certain teams. But then also got the opportunity to work in college football again, with a couple of NBA things, the world of endurance running. And I parlayed that into my new company now. And now I work in NBA and NHL, basketball and hockey. So just that's fun, keeps me busy. They're indoor sports, which is nice. So going to games from work, don't really have to worry about the elements anymore. But like both of them said, it's been great to kind of be a part of what you love and what you wanted to do growing up, even though we can't all be LeBron. So.
Right.
And speaking to your points of elements, we have a star, Miss Melissa Shulman. So ending it off with you just give us a quick career path and how you got to where you are.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Melissa, and I am actually a colleague of Don's. We work together at BodyArmor, and he used to be my boss when I first started there, but I'll get to that in a little. So I grew up about 45 minutes north of New York City, and I've always loved sports. I played sports in high school, and I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels, and I played club lacrosse there for a year, and knew I wanted to be in the sports business in some capacity, but I wasn't really sure what. And I knew I liked planning things, so when I was in high school, I don't know how I got to this conclusion, but I decided to go to the journalism school and become a PR major because I thought that was tied into PR's public relations. That, if I learned how to write, it would get me somewhere. And I think that's something that we'll talk about throughout this panel is, it doesn't necessarily matter what you end up majoring in. There's different pathways and avenues and skill sets that will allow you to break into the sports business, whether that's in marketing or sales or something else of that nature. So after graduating, so I had internships at NBC and Major League Baseball, and then worked on the corporate partnerships team at Citibank. Before landing a full-time job as an event planner for a small digital media company. So I kind of strayed away from sports because I thought I wanted.
Melissa, you always say it's small. It was not that small. She used to work for Mashable. Like, you guys remember Mashable? Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Small company.
Yeah, a digital media company. Sorry. But I knew I wanted to get back into sports. At the time, digital media was becoming a very interesting area, but I wanted to switch paths. And for me, I was finding it a little bit more difficult to both switch paths because I was moving into a new industry and also wanted a different type of job function, switching from being really an event planner to something more in marketing in general. So I actually went back to school and got my master's in sports management at Columbia University in New York City. And that is how I found my way to BodyArmor, where I am now about 2.5 years ago. I started there as a graduate intern and got connected to the company through a professor of mine, where I worked for Don. And then I got hired full-time and have been there since on the brand marketing.
Perfect. So I want to start off with a question that kind of builds off that point. And Melissa, you can start this off for us. At what point in your young career did you realize that there was a career in sports and something that you loved and you grew up playing and been around so long, and it was an actual career and there's something that you can actually pursue and have a career and it's sustained? Sure.
Probably sometime in early college, going to, I'll always remember one moment going to, at UNC, I was in class with a lot of nationally touted basketball recruits. And, they're your classmates, you follow each other on social media. And some of them were just truly like not representing themselves in the ways that I thought they should be. This was really when Twitter was starting to get big. So tweeting out things that just didn't seem that someone who had such a public profile should be doing. So that's when I kind of got the idea in my head that there must be people, if they were to become professionals, who tell them not to do that kind of stuff. And that's when I really started looking more into it. And I think where I am maybe not as similar to Melcom and Don and Ruben, is that I don't think I ever wanted to be an agent, which I think a lot of people do, because that's a career that's, more seen rather than someone on the marketing side, more in like the back office like we are. But that's kind of how I started looking into different pathways, like once I got to college, and just a lot of listening and learning through different people.
Yeah. Okay, and Don, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, initially I thought I wanted to be an agent because all I ever saw was teams and like athletes, so I just kind of picked that up. But when things kind of changed for me, when I was doing the diversity internship with Octagon and through NASCAR, Sprint was the title sponsor of the NASCAR series. So right now I think it's Xfinity or somewhere, or No Monster. And so we were like figuring out a way to like make Sprint be more valuable to NASCAR consumers, and ultimately having them be able to sell more phones and services at the time. And this is, the iPhone have just launched, and Sprint kept trying to come up with these iPhone killers, which clearly didn't work. So we, really started thinking about products and how do we interact with the consumers. And if you've never been to a NASCAR race or don't know anything about NASCAR, you have unprecedented access to the drivers and the pit people and all this kind of stuff. It's a really open sport, or what have you. And so Sprint just started doing things like giving people unprecedented access. Like one of the best things they ever did was Miss Sprint Cup. And they really hired like 3 models to go around and be the voice for Sprint at NASCAR at every single race. So they had a personality and a talent to that. And then they started to use social media at this time, like Twitter, primarily, and Facebook, to really start to help bring in the masses. So even though you were a race fan and you lived out in California, you still, and the race was in Darlington, you still could kind of get access from Sprint by following, and they started getting exclusive content to people who had Sprint phones and Sprint services. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, how do I come up with programs to that nature? Because what I saw was, at the end of the day, there's so many different sports. So someone's doing this in NASCAR, somebody's doing it in NBA, somebody's doing it in college football, somebody's doing it in lacrosse, somebody's doing it everywhere. And so I just started researching. Brands that span the sport, Anheuser-Busch, Coca-Cola, like just started going down the list, small brands, Wilson, endemic brands that you need the stuff to like actually play the sport, the Spaldings of the world, the Adidas of the Nikes of the world. And I just started going through all these brands and started thinking about like, well, what are they trying to do in sports? And then like, and because I was in college as a marketing major, it just started to kind of click. They're trying to sell their goods and services, and they're trying to really align themselves with the passion point. And when I was at Octagon, they taught their motto was passion, engagement, and results. And the concept was that at any given time, all of us are consumers. And if you ever said, like, if I go to anybody on the panel, any of the students, and give you a choice to do anything you want to do, you're always going to choose something that you're probably most passionate about. And so Octagon's theme was that sports is a passion point. People watch sports to get away. It's a passion for them. It could be like they want to play or what have you. So it was always, they started with passion. And then how do you engage that following around their passion? And then how do you drive results for your clients? And once I kind of understood that and they broke it down that simply, for me, it was like, okay, let's come up with creative ideas. Let's think about new ways we can do stuff, whether it's as small as we're giving away t-shirts at a college football game, and they were all just All-State branded. Well, no one cares about an All-State brand. But as soon as we started putting the college team brand up there, like LSU, Alabama, people started like, oh, I want those giveaways. So now the engagement rate, because you're on site at an Alabama football game and there's Alabama stuff that you're giving away, the engagement rate that we got from just making that small tweak was through the roof because the passion for Alabama is so high. And so we drove additional results for our clients. And so once we started seeing that happen, for me, it was like, oh, Sparks Marketing is where it is. And there's a whole other entity into like rights and who has the rights to this and contract negotiations, all that kind of stuff that you start to pick up. But for me, it really started with who the consumers are, what's the passion around sports, and how do you kind of follow that up and really use it for good.
Perfect. And Melcom, did you want to build off that? What was your transition like and alignment into sports and entertainment?
Yeah, I think my earliest memory was actually reading ESPN magazine, and I don't even know if they still like distribute that. But
it doesn't exist
ESPN
anymore,
magazine,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm really that old. So there was actually an article about sport management programs, and that's when I discovered that there was people study this in college and people make careers out of this. I think more specifically with relation to marketing and content, when I was working at the NBA league office, we had the D League back in 2013, 2014, and nobody really liked the D League, right? Like it was like a second tier product, like low quality basketball. But eventually we started to get like two-way contracts and all these things that were happening, and the quality of play was increasing. Almost every NBA team had their own G League affiliate. And so what I realized was that there's a perception gap. Like a lot of people still think of it as like these D League teams and these random places in Idaho and terrible basketball, where the reality is that they're NBA players playing on assignment. These are affiliated with NBA teams. There's money. It's high quality basketball. And what I found passion in was using marketing and content and storytelling to bridge that perception gap. So how do we tell the story of a Quinn Cook? I saw some people from the DMV, so I'll shout out Quinn Cook. Like Quinn Cook, and he, like, his kind of path from DeMatha to Duke, and then he didn't go drafted, but he used the G League, and now he's with the Golden State Warriors, and now he's doing all these things, right? So how do you tell those stories? And at the same time we're telling those stories, people are learning things about the G League and learning things about two-way contracts or assignment players and all those things, which then help aid our perception, and to Don's point, help us drive more results and get more tune in for our games on TV and everything else, right? So I think that was when I really kind of fell in love with the idea of marketing content as a specific way to kind of build my career.
Perfect. And you just rung, so is your time, Ruben, to
So yeah, I'll jump in and kind of, so like Don was saying, everything that I knew about sports growing up for the most part was what you see when you watch a game. And so as the players, there's coaching, you see GMs, you don't really see them, but agents are a part of that world. But for me and where I fit in, because I decided well before that I didn't want to be an agent, because I thought I did. And then when I found out what you really have to do to be an agent, I was like, no, I'm good. But so for me personally, my route was broadcasting. And I went to school, I was a broadcast major. I thought where I was going to fit in was talking about sports. Like Don was saying, passion, it was the thing that I was most passionate about. When I was in college, I was on the radio. I did a NCAA tournament radio show every year when that came up, because I was like, I'm gonna talk to somebody about this and I'm gonna make everybody listen. So that's the way I went. Broadcasting is a very difficult field to get into early in your career, because you every career you're going to start at the bottom and have to work your way up. There's just a lot of steps when it comes to broadcasting, and to get to that very top, everybody says, oh, I'm going to be on ESPN, or oh, I want to call college football games, blah, blah. And it's not a physically taxing profession. So those guys are working until they're like 75, 80 years old. Yeah. And so there's just jobs that are backed up. So I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't the way I want to go. But through that, I started one of my internships I had while I was still in school was with ISP College, which is now IMG College. And I was working with their radio. But then through that, I started working with their marketing team and things like that. And that kind of connected what I was doing with my school internship and working in the athletic department. So I was like, okay, well, there's a lot more that goes on besides what's just on the field. And then as I went forward, found out working in the athletic department wasn't what I wanted to do. I kind of did the same thing Don did. I did a bunch of research, like the Nikes, the Under Armours, the Gatorades, all those things. I didn't say BodyArmor because y'all didn't exist yet. But
you can't drop those names right now. Wait, Don, you guys aren't sponsored for nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, that other brand. And
other brand. There you go.
We so I was just looking. I was like, I always see their logos around sports, like everything that you do, whether it's at the game, at their practices, just at a store, the posters that are up, the activations that you see going around at a game. Like, I was like, okay, these companies are at least a start. It's like I started looking into it, and then I found my way into marketing, because at the end of the day, that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't really know about agencies until post-college. And so that was something that I didn't find until later on. But I found out, like, oh, agencies, that's kind of where a lot of the work that I'm seeing from these brands is happening. And so I was like, okay, well, if I try to go that route, and I got in and then kind of flowered, and just agency kind of helped me see what you'll learn is like kind of the three sides of sports deals. And you got the team, the agency, and the brands. And agencies, you get to see a lot of both sides of the team and the brand. And so that just helped me learn and grow and make a lot of relationships to continue learning and growing and kind of keep pushing and knowing people like the ones on this panel that are great people to know as you move forward.
And these are some phenomenal answers. Thanks so much for taking that and running with it, folks. For those of you that are joining in, I think there's 32 of you that are in the Zoom right now. Feel free to keep asking some questions in the group chat. We'll be sure to get to those here. I guess we just spent some time talking about your exposure into sports, and I think a lot of you have just spoken and touched on like how you were able to combine your passion with a career, like, and finding that I guess that Venn diagram where both of those things overlap. Taking a step back into that, a lot of our attendees are in high school, maybe just about to graduate, going into college. Would love a little bit more insight as to like maybe some challenges you had in finding that passion up front. Like I'll volunteer this. It's probably a little embarrassing here, and don't ask any other questions. I can follow up afterwards. But I started off college as a dance major, really quickly realized that I wasn't good enough, and then moved to like an education major, and then ended up with a business marketing degree from Wayne State University. But there was a lot of like challenges there. There were a lot of like I didn't know then, but like, spending time doing something you don't like is just as valuable as spending time doing something you do like.
Yeah. So
I'm curious to hear from all of you is like, what were the initial challenges you had maybe in the transition from high school to college or within college to find that passion? And then what were the immediate next step you took once you found out that that was the case? I think some of you already answered this question, but if we could dive into just a little bit into that for the group. And Don, I guess we'll start with you, and then we'll kick it over.
Yeah, sure. So it's a really good point. Like, when I was graduating from high school, one of my biggest challenges was I was coming from a small town. And then I went to a small private university in Johnson & Wales that was known for culinary, not so much for marketing and business and what have you. So right off the bat, like perception, like one, there was the stories I was telling myself that I was putting certain restrictions on myself that, I come from a small town, I'm at a culinary university, people don't really know who you are. Like, none of that matters. None of that matters. It's about what you can do and perform. Secondly, the challenge I really had was there was the perception I had of sports was, again, based on what I saw on TV, right? So I saw athletes, management, and Johnson & Wales had a really good program on like operations and things of that nature, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. I threw some parties in high school, and I was like, and I love the fact that how do you get people to collect a peak group of people do something. At that time, I had no idea that's what that was. I had no idea that's what marketing, promotions, and things of that nature was. I later on found that out. So part of it was like even trying to, one, define what I really like to do was kind of difficult initially until I realized like, that's something called marketing. And then once I found that, was like spending the time to like really dive into what that actually meant and how marketing really applied. And so that one-on-one class of marketing was impactful for me because it started to uncover that's where I wanted to go. The other challenge I also had too was like you're going to have barriers of entries in any career. And sometimes it's like you'll start to research, even Ruben, we talked about being agents. Once I started to research what an agent was like, it was kind of demoralizing to me. I was like, I need a law degree. And I was like, I'm a marketing major. I should have majored in pre-med. I'm at the wrong university. I was like completely torn, right? Like I was like, man, I didn't spend wasted money. Like, and so like part of it was like, all right, that's a barrier of entry. But as soon as you start like opening your eyes to like a vast majority, and like a professor of mine always said it best, he was like, there's a stuff that you know, which is the smallest amount of stuff possible. Then there's a bigger piece that is the stuff that you don't know, but you don't know it. And then the bigger piece of that is the stuff you don't know that you don't know. And ultimately it was like, go and find out the stuff that you don't know about and that you don't even know about. And so I was like, what do you mean? He was like, go have conversations with people in careers and stuff that you never thought about. And that's what we started doing. Luckily with the internet now, LinkedIn, Instagram, like Facebook, like I know we go up there and it's like fun and games and, like people trolling, like Jaden Will getting trolled really well right now, all the memes and stuff. But there's another part, they call it social networking for a reason. And it's the networking piece, right? Like just what we're doing now, being able to say, I follow this person who works at Adidas. I'm going to shoot them a DM. And especially as high school students, if you always take the approach of like, I'm really trying to learn more about what the sports career and aspirations are, people will be more willing to respond to that because everyone has been in that position where they didn't know what they wanted to do and they were reaching out to other people to at least get an understanding of like a day in the life or what it really takes to go into that experience. So for me, the first the challenge I had to break through was like the limitations I put on myself from being from a small town, going to a school that I thought initially was the wrong school for me, which actually ended up being a huge blessing in disguise. And then secondly, trying to be able to define what my passions and things that I really like to do. I didn't know I like to connect people. And I didn't know what I like to connect them to at that point. But once I took that one-on-one class and was open to, taking that class in the first place, it ultimately helped me like take the blinders off my eyes and kind of start to put some context around what I thought I wanted to do.
That's awesome. Like kudos to you for stepping outside of your comfort zone, to do something like that. I know it's for some of us on the line that it could be a daunting challenge, right? To know what you don't know and then go pursue that. That's huge. Melissa, I'll turn it over to you in the same question, but I know you mentioned a quote in your intro. You mentioned that, major doesn't matter. And I think a lot of us think that I put a lot of stock in my major up front, and I know that things change. And so I guess, how would you answer the question in terms of like the challenges that you faced, and was choosing a major a challenge that you had to like overcome?
Um, I'll take a step back before I answer the question, which is that in my head, similar to Don, I was on student government in high school. I was the president of my high school. I hosted our pep rallies, our dances, and all the kind of stuff. So I really knew the one thing I knew going into college upon graduating high school was that I liked planning. Still true today. Love planning in all aspects of my life. But I really liked planning. And so I thought that maybe there was a way I'd be able to translate that into planning larger scale things. Like in my head, I was like, oh, I'd love to plan, the Super Bowl party. And that was really the breadth of what I knew. Once, now, however many years ago, since I've graduated high school, I know there's a plethora of different ways you could end up planning Super Bowl parties for different brands or leagues or et cetera. But that was kind of like surface level what I knew. And for me, I don't know exactly how I figured out this, but I knew I needed to learn how to write because I knew that in whatever I wanted to do, there would be power in being articulate and knowing how to communicate what I wanted to say. And that was just kind of like the baseline that I established for myself. I think the first biggest obstacle for me that ended up turning into a really good lesson, and we actually spoke about this when the four of us got together late last week to just talk about our panel, was that for me, and you mentioned something like this, I learned a lot from what I learned I didn't like. And that was super important for me too. Having exposure, and this kind of, aligns nicely with what Don was saying, having exposure to anything, you will be able to take something away from it. That something could be that this is my passion, I really enjoy this, I want to do this for a living, or I really like this subject matter that I'm working in, but I don't think that the skill set that I need for this is what I like. Or the opposite. My skill set works, but I don't like the subject matter or the vertical that I'm working in. For example, I got an internship at NBC after my sophomore year of college. I was hoping it would be in sports or on the Olympics or maybe even in news. And I ended up working for a cable channel called Bravo. I worked in PR, public relations, which was my major. And I decided that I didn't want to be a traditional public relations person and that I didn't want to work in reality TV. But those were two really good learning lessons for me because as I've gone along in my career, it's kind of been a process of elimination of things that I don't like to do that have led me to where I am and where I'm going. So I think for high school, if I was telling myself something looking back, I think the really good advice was go to a school that will make you happy because there will be something there that will help you get to your next step. And I think a lesson that I was taught really early on was that having short-term versus long-term views and goals on things will help define where you go and where you're going. Short-term, it's probably very overwhelming. I cannot even imagine what applying to college is like these days. It's competitive, it's, crazy, it's all these different things. Go where it makes you, happy in the short term, but in the long term, you'll have learning lessons that you take away from it. So I think, yes, different challenges, but also more like Don said, learning things along the way. And some of those learnings will be that you don't like something, and that's just as powerful of a learning as finding out something you're really passionate about. And for the question about my major, there are aspects of what I learned in college that I still use to help navigate the business world, because I think something that college doesn't necessarily prepare people best for is the day-to-day interactions of office environments and emails and all these kinds of things. And that whatever major you end up taking or studying, parts of that will help translate into making you more savvy in the business world as you go. But for right now, coming out of high school, you don't have to worry about that quite yet. I think that it's more as you transition into college, or you're in that first year of college, just being open to listening to others, because you'll take away different lessons from everyone along the way.
Absolutely. And I definitely can attest to that point as well. Being that I am a college student, I was about to say high school student, but we actually have our question from our high school students, and this is for Melcom and Ruben. So the question is from Austin Griffiths. The question is, being that you guys have all these different experiences in all these different fields, mostly aligning with sports, how did you guys ultimately transfer those skills into your next position and your next opportunity?
Yeah, I can get a start. I definitely think that it's easy for us to talk and reflect about our careers looking backwards, but as you can probably tell, each of us picked up something new along the way, whether we liked the experience or we didn't, whether it was an internship or full-time or whatever it was, we picked up some new insights, or even for me, I often think about picking up new context or speaking different languages. So like at every stage, I've been a manager on a basketball team in college. I worked at an agency. I worked for an NBA team. I worked at the NBA league office. I did marketing. I did sponsorship. I did all these different things. And each time I almost feel like I learned how to speak a different language. So if you put me in the room with a sponsorship executive or somebody on Don's team, or brand manager, I can speak to them about their campaigns. If you put me in the room with the digital products person, I can speak to them about digital user experience. If I talk to a content person, we get to talk about storytelling and what the production and development side and production, and then what the rollout looks like, right? And so you can seek out different experiences to give you a more holistic view and approach. And I think that without all of those, I wouldn't have got the job I'm in now. Last summer, I was at Twitter with the social media platform, and again, they wouldn't have hired me for this role if I didn't have like each of those boxes checked, because it made me a unique applicant, and they could put me in a room with the agent. I could talk to a client directly. I'm talking to a football recruit tomorrow. They're like, day 3, talk to a recruit, and I'm like, cool. So each time you step into a room or step into an opportunity, just seek out something new. Try to build tools to put into your toolkit, and also I think the last step is learning how to talk about that or monetize your success and say, this is why I'm uniquely qualified or uniquely positioned, or this is all the things I've done, right? Like, so when Don talks about throwing parties, later on he realized I was helping to bring people together. Now I can speak about that as a skill set I have, right? So that's like the ultimate goal, is to be able to speak and sell yourself and for those experiences that you acquire over time.
And building off that, Ruben?
Yeah, to build off that, so I moved around a decent amount when I was younger. I went to 2 elementary schools. I only went to 1 middle school, but then I went to 2 high schools and 2 colleges. So throughout my entire time of growing up, I was always being put in a new position of having to meet new people. And so that, if you can't tell, I'm a talker. And so like being able to do that and talk to, you put me in a room with anybody, I'm going to talk to them. Like I've never met a stranger. And so doing that it kind of helped me as I got older. Like a lot of times people go to networking events or different things like that, and they won't talk to people. I'm so used to having to do that. That's always just been there for me. But then that's why I wanted to be a broadcaster, mixing 2 of my favorite things, sports and talking. And then when I moved past that, and like my experiences, being a broadcast major, having to learn the writing side behind the camera and in front of the camera, I understand the television side of sports, the broadcasting, all that kind of stuff. I never worked for a pro team, but I did do a lot of work with my college team. And so I worked in basketball, football. I had to do volleyball, wrestling. I worked in tons of sports. And so I understood what it was like to kind of work for a team in that environment. And everything is on this one goal. Everybody's working essentially for a championship, whatever your piece is to that team. And then with my internship after that, where it was kind of getting me a little more insight into what it's like to work for a team that's not your team. Because working for it as college, great. I loved Appalachian State, so doing the stuff for their sports was awesome. I realized that wasn't necessarily global for me because the school that I worked at afterward was technically one of App State's rivals. And so I was like, I don't really want to work for them. Like, among other things, that kind of, like, it showed me this isn't really the world I want to be in. But I now had that experience of kind of working for a team, and what has been said multiple times before, I knew what I didn't want to do. And so then when I kind of took all of that, and I love talking, I know the broadcast side of it, I know the team side of it, and one thing that Melissa said that kind of rung out to me personally, I was a student government as well, but I was not the president or vice president. I didn't want to be. And it's funny because my job has been throughout time a lot of planning. I don't like planning events, but I like planning what's going to happen at the event. So in student government, we're doing like, oh, when is it going to be? Like, I don't care about that. And we need to find a location. Like, okay, cool, let's find a location. Let's talk about what's going to happen there. And so that part of me has like rolled into all those other things. And so now working at an agency, which is something to tie into Don's question, I had no clue about agencies, like I said before I graduated from college. So that was just a whole nother avenue of sports world that I didn't know. But I was able to kind of plan events and brainstorm and think of like what's going to bring like people together that they're going to enjoy. I know how to talk to people. I know it looks good. I know like what kind of stuff teams want to see. How can I bring that together into being a campaign or an event or something like that I know people will enjoy? And so I was kind of able to just roll everything together. And like Melcom said, you pick up different things along the way. If you may not love what you're doing, but there's always lessons and knowledge to be learned in that situation that you can take on your journey.
And one thing I would say that, like when Ruben was talking, is that some of these things that he learned about himself had nothing to do about work or major or college. He was like, I'm a talker, right? Like I make friends and I talk to people. Like that is just something that you may learn about yourself. Some of you guys are the problem solvers in your friend groups, like, or you're the person that is like always kind of like the conflict resolution person, or you may be the person that is a little bit more introverted, but when you say something, it's a little bit more impactful. Like you're a thinker. Those are all good traits. Like there are skill sets in this entire industry, like strategists, they're thinkers. What would happen if we do this? How will people respond if we put this message out? They're thinkers. They're thinking, they may internalize things, but ultimately they figure out a way to like say, here's how I take my thoughts and explain it to someone else. Conflict resolution people. If you look at any of the leagues that were going through collective bargaining, the negotiations, there are conflict resolutions people in those organizations. If you work for an NFL Players Association, there are people that help the NFL players deal with conflict resolutions. Hey, what does my life look like outside of sports? That's an issue. That's a problem that they're trying to solve, and there's people that kind of help them get their way. So some of these stuff are just softer skills that you may learn about yourself as you're going around that eventually can apply to certain jobs and career paths.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm in listening to this, it sounds like there's a couple different ways. I know there's more than these two, but it's like whether you want to be a creator or a connector, you still have to be a really good communicator.
Yeah.
And Melcom, I think you talked about storytelling, right? And how that's so pivotal. And I think like looking back, you know, like storytelling it's hard. It's hard to do that, but over time and experience, I think you can build that muscle there. There was a question here from a student, Jaden Stark. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. The panelists, you all talked a little bit about internships already, about you had multiple internships as well. The question from Jaden is, what is your best advice? I don't know if there's probably one, but for getting internships as either a high school student or an early college student? I'll throw that to the group, whoever wants to answer that first.
I'll start if you guys want. I'd say there's probably 2 or 3 things that are most important. I think the first is take advantage of where you currently are. So for example, if you live in or are at college in Charlotte, North Carolina, do research about the industries that are around you. For example, like Don, NASCAR and a lot of their teams are based in Charlotte. And maybe you're not interested in NASCAR to start, but there are functions of the business that, you know, like Don mentioned, translate throughout different sports. So that what I would say is the big thing. I would also say that sports in general is really a people business. It's not a big industry. And so the power of meeting people and connecting with people and talking to people is super important. I think that it's really easy to get discouraged because, you know, applying to jobs online now is really hard. It's really hard to make your resume stand out. And if you're able to have a conversation with someone at a company or a brand or where a team or a league that you're interested in working, that will be so helpful because A, you'll learn something that you probably didn't know originally before applying for that internship. And B, they might be willing to, and you don't have to ask them directly, give you a contact in HR that might help you, get your resume one step closer. That's not to say it'll always work, but I found that I had way more success at no matter what point in my career it was applying for a job or an internship if I connected with someone at that place before I applied for it. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, sports is, there are a finite number of teams, a finite number of leagues. We're seeing more expansion, but it's hard to get in. And so once you're in, that's awesome. But there's also a lot of companies and brands you wouldn't think of as sports brands that do work within sports.
Good
And so
point.
Don and I work at a company, a sports drink company called BodyArmor. And I like to say that we work in a company that's sports adjacent. Our product is not the sport itself. So we're not like the NFL or the New York Knicks, where we sell the actual action on the court, the field, whatever it is. We sell a physical product, a sports drink, consumer packaged good that is adjacent to what happens on the field. So actually, a lot of our business is learning about different retail partners and different production and all these other things that happen in order to make that good and get that good in places to buy. But what Don and I work on is the marketing side, which is all powered in sports. So I think when I started looking for internships and that kind of stuff, looking in places that you wouldn't necessarily quite think where sports would exist, you might find some really good things. And a great starting place is like, now it would be like looking at pictures online of stadiums and see what brands and logos are around. And just, see where why are these places sponsoring certain things? Well, and if their logo is in a stadium or on a field or on a jersey or whatever it might be, they most likely have some job function that is tied into sports and entertainment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like the sports adjacent piece is really, really strong. Some of you may have worked a job at Foot Locker or something in a mall, at a clothing store or a sporting goods store. Like that experience can be valuable, especially if you work for another sporting apparel company, like, what have you. Then there's also now sport has the definition of an athlete has expanded. You look at, and I actually would credit Under Armour for kind of like starting to position it that way, and Nike has just kind of taken it and ran with it. But, the fitness aspect of things, like there are a lot of companies out here now that like are growing their business, like a Lululemon, for example, on that athleisure, which is a subproduct of sports, and that they may dabble in other pieces of sports like running and other more active lifestyle activities that you can also look at too. So the other thing to answer your question too is like about being able to, you may not have an extensive network in sports, but somebody, right? And so like if it's a matter of like, hey, my dad friend has a friend who works at the Cleveland Cavaliers, like have your dad ask his friend to ask his friend,
Yeah.
to give your informational interview or come shadow them for a day or any of that kind of stuff. Because again, you as a student, no one's really going to say, I don't want to be bothered with this kid. Like most people are going to be like, oh, let's figure it out. Now, I will say, don't do it if you need it within the next 2 weeks. Give yourself some time.
Yes.
Because people have lives and careers and things, and they want to make sure they give you the best experience and show you enough. But there may be somebody that, like, that knows somebody even distantly. I have a cousin who is a younger cousin of mine who just graduated. And he was like, hey, I'm trying to find internships. And he reached out, and I was like, I don't know anybody in that industry, but I know a friend of mine who used to work in that industry, so I'll put you in touch with them. And he got like 5 or 6 informational interviews off of that. Like, I had no connection in that space, but somebody else did. Like, so don't be afraid to also let people give them an understanding of what you may want to do or what you're at least thinking about. It doesn't do you any good by holding it in. Like, a network is only as good if you share what you're ultimately trying to do. And it could be like, hey, I'm just trying to get an internship this summer because I don't want to be at home and have my parents like making me do mad chores and what have you. And if I can get any type of work experience right now, I'll be happy for it. Somebody may be like, great, I know this guy at a law firm who needs somebody to come in, and you may be filing away contracts. But guess what? There's a ton of contracts in sports. So you may get an opportunity to see what a real contract looks like. Like, that's just good work experience in general, like, to kind of help you get there. So especially those of you that are juniors and maybe not seniors, or even sophomores or freshmen, like, these are things that you can kind of be doing now. And then for those that are seniors, like, I would start to, as you're preparing to go to college, I would go and just start researching online. Like, pretty much every place has an internship program. If you just go to their website, you can go like wilsonsportinggoods.com or eastbay.com, scroll all the way down to careers, and you'll probably find information about internships, jobs, and stuff like that. And you can find the qualifications and what they're looking for. They'll post it. They'll say, we're looking for bright young people, that meet this kind of qualification. And then you can say, do I have this? Do I not have this? And now I have time to prepare. So when I get ready to apply, I'm the candidate that they're ultimately looking for. So some of the stuff is preparation and to get to what your goals. So Melissa talked about short-term and long-term goals. If your long-term goal is to get an internship, maybe start looking at what they require of internships and see, like, do I have this? Do I not have this? And then work backwards to figure out how you can get what you need to ultimately get that internship.
Perfect. And to Don's point, I want to let you guys know that I am a testament to just putting yourself out there. Like, your hard work never goes unnoticed. And when you do put yourself in uncomfortable situations of growth, that's when you see the most growth. And I feel like it's really important for us to realize that we are valuable, and our perspective is what the professionals are looking for. So it's time to really walk with that and really just move forward with that attitude and that confidence. But I wanted to end off for our high school students with some advice for them. So we'll start with you, Melcom, and then go on to Ruben. So knowing what you know now, through all the experience that you have throughout your career and different people that you know and opportunities that you've been awarded, if you could go back to your high school self and do something differently, what would you go back and do?
Yeah, I think one, and it kind of relates to last question, but I think in high school and like my freshman year, I kind of waited for opportunities to come to me, or I just applied to whatever was out there. But it's hard because this is one of the industries where you need experience to get experience. And it's kind of this weird dynamic where, like, you'll try to apply for something, they'll be like, oh, you don't have any experience. You're like, that's why I'm applying to this.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's like, and so what I would have done, and I did it my freshman year, towards the end of my freshman year and beginning of my sophomore year, was I created my own website focused on NBA prospects, and I was already really passionate about draft prospects and scouting and writing up stuff and talking to my friends about it. And I started to write it myself, and I made a website. And back then I had to learn some coding. Now you can just like do Wix or do whatever. But there's so many ways to create for yourself, whether it's an Instagram account or a Twitter account or a YouTube channel or a podcast. You can create for yourself and create your own experience and grow your own, be entrepreneurial and grow your own, so that all of a sudden when you're applying to that internship, you already have something. You're not starting from zero. And so for me, once I started that website, when I applied to Octagon, the only thing they asked about was like that website. They're like, if I hadn't taken that time to do, and I should have done it sooner, I wouldn't have gotten that internship. And without Octagon, I wouldn't have got the Sixers. Without Sixers, I wouldn't have got the NBA, et cetera, right? So it's thinking about what can you do, what are your strengths, and be honest with yourself about your strengths and your interests, and think about what you can create for yourself. Because to be honest, like I know a lot of you all might feel busy, but like it's COVID, quarantine, you're high school, like you got a lot of time. So like how can you apply it in productive ways that you can use as part of your portfolio or resume building going forward?
Yeah, I'll be quick because my answer is pretty much the exact same as Melcom's and Don's from before. But the one thing I just wish I was more aggressive in going after my goals. I thought, like Melcom said, things kind of just came to you. I made all A's in high school. Like I played sports. I was a student government. I thought everything was supposed to come to me, and that's just not how it is. You have to go and be aggressive. You can't be silent, like Don said. You have to tell people what you want. Be clear. Like, I want to do this. I want to work in sports. I'm trying to get an internship with BodyArmor. And like, be clear and intentional with what you do. And like Melcom said, if you have something that you're passionate about and that you want to do, start doing it. If you want to do advertising, because part of my broadcasting goal, I wanted to make commercials. And so me and one of my buddies in college, like we both wanted to work at Nike, Under Armour, do different things. And so what we started doing was writing ads. And we were broadcast majors. So when we were shooting our projects, we would use the cameras and like film little commercials and stuff for it. And like, how would we do this? We would get our friends to jump in the commercials and everything like that. So we had a reel. And like, so when people want to see, what have you been doing? Why should I let you in? And when you have something to show them, obviously it's going to be more amateur because you're in high school, but they're going to say like, oh, you got good ideas though. And like, we can work with this. I can teach you how to do this, but you have already got the wheel spinning. And then the last thing I'll say is, other people have touched on it. Communication is key. Melissa was PR, like we've all been in marketing, and I was in broadcasting. One of my professors in college beat into our head, never use a $5 word with a 5-cent word to work just fine. Is in broadcasting, you want to make sure that
that's a gym. That's what you call a gym right there.
That is amazing.
I'm writing it down right now.
Like, never speak over people's heads. But like, there is a time for marketing speak. There is a time for certain things, and learning when it's appropriate to use which kind of, like, which speak you have, or like Melcom said, speak in different languages. Knowing when it's time to use each one is a very valuable thing as you go forward.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what both of them said, when you don't have experience, the best thing you do is create your own experience. Like, you guys have a wealth of technology and opportunities here that didn't exist. I bet when Ruben was shooting commercials, the quality that you can shoot on an iPhone right now was not the quality that you have right at this second, right? True. And in the midst of COVID, there's blessings in everything. There's a silver lining in everything. This time period sucks. It sucks if you're graduating. It just sucks for everybody. But you'll never have another time of this nature to do something about it. So for those of you like, oh, I wish I could just do this, go online to YouTube University and figure out how to do it, right? YouTube, I use it still. I use YouTube to find out a lot of stuff. You know, the ability to create, as what Melcom was talking about, is major right now. You know, like Omar, who started House of Highlights for Bleacher Report, just started doing, and he did this in college, started taking film of like NBA games that he thought was cool and created one of the biggest Instagram accounts there is right now in the sports world that Bleacher Report is monetizing for millions of dollars, right? Like the Issa Rae started on YouTube making sketches and things of that nature, and then parlay that into Insecure, into an HBO show. Like, so there's work that goes into it that people only see you when you get to the successful piece. They don't see all the other times that you made a bad ad, or you and your friends wrote a radio script that was terrible. Like, they don't see like the initial flyer promotions that we made to promote parties that were terrible. Like, you know, like, you just get better. And so as you continue to work on things, you just get better over time and better over time. And then by the time you really get to the point that you start really hitting, you'll be LeBroning in your own sense of it, right? Like, you'll be at the top of your game in your own sense, but you got to put in that work. And right now, there's no school and virtual learning. I know most of you guys are surfing the internet anyway. So, like, figure out something that you want to put that passion and that energy into, but you have to put in the work. It doesn't matter. You have to go and make your own way. No one's going to come and hand it to you. You have to go get it.
No, that's awesome, Don. I think that's a big point you're driving home, and you all drove home, is that we have time right now. You have time to invest in yourself and learn something, and it's up to you. I think in looking back, we have so much accessibility to resources that none of us had 20, 30 years ago, and so this is an opportunity where you can really like take advantage of. And so, no, this is great. The learnings here have been phenomenal. Christian, I'll throw it over to you to close this out, but thanks, folks. This has been great. Oh, you're muted, Christian.
My bad. But I need a duffel bag for all the gems y'all just dropped on me and the high school students. I know they're going to find value in it. And I want to thank you guys again for joining us and spending time with us. Like I said, you guys have been great. But it's time to come to a close. Just a final reminder for our campers. You guys are encouraged to complete assignments as part of the Career Exploration Pass program. Take advantage of this, guys, because you can win up to a $500 scholarship and a lot of sports memorabilia. So be on the lookout for that. But we'll conclude our conversation here. And I want to thank you guys again for the great knowledge you guys dropped on us. And like I said, we're definitely finding value in that. And I definitely appreciate it. So
No, thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Stay safe.
all righty, guys. We'll see you guys later. Thank y'all for joining.
Thanks.
Christian, you want to hang on?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You want to stop?